Welcome, this is the Market Wrap. I'm Agam, Vakil. It's been a rather exciting last half an hour for the session. And I'm not talking about the benchmarks, I'm talking about the broader markets. There have been some surges coming in as far as your mid-cap space is concerned. But before I go to that, we have clocked our third straight day of gains on the benchmarks. The Nifty advancing by another 1% nearly. And this time, a lot of that strength is coming on the back of Indian Oil Corp, Wipro, Coal India, ONGC, BPC. So there is an entire new pocket which is actually contributing to these gains and taking the Nifty higher. On the losing end, we have a little bit of weakness in Bharti Airtel, Adani Ports, and TCS to a certain extent, but momentum is with the gainers, specifically the oil marketing companies which have pushed the indices. But what is really interesting is the broader markets. When it comes to the NSE 500, we have seen three gainers for less than two losers, and IFCI up 17%, Vodafone Idea up 12%. We have strong numbers from Symphony, and that's the reason why it's locked in an upper circuit of 10%, as is the case for Federal Mogul Godse and Timken India, Tube Investments of India, along with Prestige Estates, all of them advancing with good momentum. In fact, all these names I've spoken about have advanced by over 7% in today's day of trade. Some amount of weakness in Chalet Hotels, down 7%. Great Eastern Shipping Corp, Birla Corp, Himadri Specialty Chemicals is looking at a little bit of weakness. But if you leave all these counters aside, on the whole, it's turned out to be a very good day of trade, as well as the last 3 weeks, or rather the last 3 days of this week, have turned out to be for the positive. But on that note, let me get in our markets editor, Niraj Shah, for his thoughts on the markets. Niraj, good afternoon.
Agam, good afternoon. And great thoughts really into what some of the mid caps have done. The point is for the week as well. Agam is trying to look at the data for the week. One, the kind of volumes that we've had the last 3 days, particularly on the derivative side, the first day of the new series as well. And banks have led the charge, isn't it? I mean, they're higher. There are some expectations. There's a lot of talk the last couple of days about an ex-banker returning and what could happen to either a bad bank proposal or a finance ministry or multiple things. Now, what I'm trying to get to is that a lot of people have some expectations about what could happen as a result of that, plus some short covering. We had banks have an exemplary rally without almost any reason, isn't it? And frankly, yesterday, today, the US markets have been quiet, but we've actually had a very good surge as well. So we're doing this quite by ourselves, by the way. Even the US China spat is failing to deter us. So maybe there's some expectation around the corner. The positive news flow, I reckon, is crucial for banks to sustain this rally, because otherwise this up move can't really sustain. We all know that banks have some accidents waiting to happen. Unless there's some actual news flow supporting the up move too, I would reckon that this could now start to fizzle out. Yesterday, the banks were looking tired. They have surprised today. Let's wait and watch if this continues. But the interesting bit is what's happening to telecom. I mean, the corrective moves have been very sharp now. They're near some key support levels. Even after expiry, Bharti's continue to correct. Reliance has been soft. So it's pretty interesting. But Agam, the moot point is, and I'll talk about some individual stocks, but the moot point is, I was looking at the 7-day performance of the Nifty 50 and the stocks which have gained. We talk about the bank Nifty as having had such a good move, Agam. Only one name in the top 15 gainers, and that is HDFC Bank. Only one financial in the last 7 days is HDFC Bank. Otherwise, it's a mix of commodity names and a few others which have done the best in the last 15. So while Bank Nifty's dominated center stage in terms of the weightage that it has, in terms of percentage moves, it's a lot of other names, autos, metals, what have you.
The 9,500 mark on the Nifty. The reason why that was crucial was over the past 3 or 4 days, we were looking at a little more writing coming around the 9,500 mark on the expectations that because the markets had already run up, there was a possibility that the markets would stall to a certain extent. That hasn't happened, and in fact, it's been taken out, which means that all those who had written the 9,500 calls are now a little bit nervous because of the kind of momentum that we have seen. Of course, a lot will depend on the FII and the DI numbers this evening, as well as where we're starting to see positions on the lower end of the spectrum inputs. But I reckon that it certainly has moved from 8,800 to 9,000 on the lower end as well. And that is something I suspect will be confirmed once we have the bow copy this evening.
Just a couple of points. Just before we get to specific stocks, do mark that we'll have some bit of negative news flow today, right? We'll have the GDP numbers coming out on the best. We will definitely have some bit of comments coming in from Donald Trump when it comes to China. That will not be taken well by the global market. So we'll have some stuff up our sleeves, which may not be the best. And then, of course, watch out for specific stocks, the likes of Vodafone Idea, Escorts, JSPL, etc. Metals might actually do well. Vodafone Idea has some news flow surrounding it, even though the company said that they have no such proposal at hand. And Escorts because of the auto ban. So it promises to be an interesting weekend out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, I'm sure a lot more cues over the weekend, considering this is also the last few days in terms of earnings, at least the big ones. So we'll be watching out for that as well. But Niraj, on that note, thank you so much for that perspective. And well, on that note, it's also a wrap on this edition. But there's lots more lineup. Stay tuned to BloombergQuint, and we will keep bringing you on.